diving into the UFC Vegas 43 betting preview presented to you by DenverSportsBetting.com. Make sure that you go to DenverSportsBetting.com to check out the latest in your sports betting information. So if we're taking a look at the main event this weekend, we have a women's bantamweight match between essentially women's MMA royalty. Let's just be honest here. We have Cupcake Miesha Tate. She's taking on Ketlen Viera. And this fight is a big stepping stone back toward title contention for Miesha following her brief retirement, having a couple of kids, and then making the return. You know, Miesha, she's a former UFC world champion. She's one of the pioneers of the game. She sits at a 19-7 record with fighting some of the top females of the game throughout the entirety of it being recognized as a sanctioned sport for the women's ranks. You know, if you take a look at who some of those losses are to, because like Josh and I usually typically say, who you lose to matters. Your resume and your strength of schedule is a big deal. You know, if you're carrying a couple of losses, it's not the biggest deal in the world considering who those losses may be to. Let's just take a look at the resume here, and this is going to go across a couple different promotions. We're taking a look at one, Amanda Nunes. I mean, come on. That's when Amanda started her title reign, and she hasn't looked back. Ronda Rousey. That was during the height of Ronda Mania. You know, obviously, that was one of the biggest feuds of the more modern MMA era. The hatred and the vitriol between Ronda and Miesha is real. Their bitterness and their turmoil was evident the entire series where they coached against each other on The Ultimate Fighter, and it spewed out multiple different times. You know, from weigh-ins, face-offs to the way that post-fight antics were handled. You know, it was just it was never a positive moment between those two. Kat Zingano being another one, and also by the way, that was Ronda twice of that total. But Kat Zingano, we talked earlier about how pivotal of a figure that Kat Zingano, how much of a pioneer and how real deal legit Kat Zingano was throughout the height of her reign. Kat Zingano was undefeated at that point. She was 7-0 going into that matchup and continued her reign there. Sarah Kaufman. Sarah Kaufman was also another pioneer in the women's ranks who she powered through and was in title fights. She fought against some of the toughest women out there. So when we're taking a look at Miesha all across the board, and then another one being Raquel Pennington, toughest of the tough. As long as Miesha Tate has her mind right, as long as Miesha Tate has her mentals in check, I love her in this matchup, even though the odds say that it's a -120, which is basically near even as far as the line goes. Ketlen Viera, don't get me wrong, she's a very, very tough opponent. That's going to be someone who brings the fight, and if Miesha is not on her game, she's going to get thumped. But if we're talking at their bests, and you know, don't let me I guess contradict myself here, because she has a win over Kat Zingano, albeit it was a split decision win back at UFC 222. But you know, she is coming off of a loss right now to Yana Kunitskaya. But I don't know. I think that she's a very tough fighter. She's sitting at a +100. There is value there. You know, so if you're looking at the value of the pick, you know, if we're a dead even, some people like the philosophy of if you have a pretty near matchup, go with the dog. I personally, though, I think that it's going to be Miesha Tate. I think that Miesha continues that run, and she may, depending on how well the fight goes, next matchup could very well be against, say, someone like an Amanda Nunes. Maybe needs one more fight, but I don't know. Like I say, depending on how the matchup goes, depending on the outcome of Amanda's fight with Juliana Pena and if she takes any damage or anything along those lines. I think that it's, because you heard me right. I'm definitely stepping over Juliana Pena there. I don't think that Juliana Pena is going to beat Amanda. I think that that's the next fight for them to make in that women's bantamweight division. The co-main event, though, I think is one of the most enticing matchups that we have right now as far as the middle ranks of the welterweight division goes. We have Michael Kiesa against Sean Brady, and those are guys that are both right outside of that top tier of title contention right now, but both guys are dogs. Both guys are extremely tough and great grapplers. It's going to be a grappler's delight, hopefully. Although sometimes when we see two guys who are strong grapplers, or girls for that matter, two fighters who are strong grapplers, it tends to be a stand-up match for some reason. Nobody wants to get caught, but Sean Brady is something special, man. Michael Kiesa, don't get me wrong, Michael Kiesa is as game and as tough as a veteran as you can possibly imagine out there. And Michael Kiesa is very definitely a step up in competition for Sean Brady. Although, I got to say, what Sean Brady was able to do in that fight with somebody who is as real deal McCoy, legit, tough, savage veteran in Court McGee, man, that was really what sold me on Sean Brady to begin with, was what he was able to do with what he did with Court McGee in that fight. He's been on a run, obviously, since then. He's coming off of back-to-back finishes. He had the technical submission against Christian Aguilera with the guillotine choke. Then he arm triangled Jake Matthews. Michael Kiesa, on the other side of things, he's trying to rebound from that loss where he got submitted and darsed by Vicente Luque. Now, again, like I say, both of these guys are going to be tough grapplers, but maybe it comes down to who has the better stand-up to offer or who can figure out a shot. Again, a extremely tight line. You have Michael Kiesa coming in the underdog at plus 130, whereas you have Sean Brady, who he's coming in as the favorite, sitting at a minus 150. It's definitely it's a toss-up, but for my money, and even though he's coming off of the injury that was pretty significant with having to have surgery and everything, I think that Sean Brady gets this one done against Michael Kiesa. Now, if we're going to take a look at a couple of other matchups out there to put the spotlight on, we're going to take a look at maybe an interesting line or two and just some people who are worth, from a fan's perspective, that you should keep your eye on and really, really just pay attention to throughout the weekend. And some of these are on the prelims. I know some people only like to tune in for the main event. Watch the prelims, people. That's where you get to see and you get to attach yourself to some of these future stars that, will go on to be those main card fighters at some point in time. One of them being one of the most exciting guys to enter the UFC this last year in Terence McKinney. Now, T-Rex, he came through like a wrecking ball in his UFC debut, and I cashed in handsomely because of that fight. He fought the steamroller Matt Frivola, and there was a line that DraftKings had put out for, I don't even remember what the extreme skew of it was, but for the fight to end within the first 60 seconds. If you know anything about Terence will start fast. Terence has multiple knockouts within the first minute, or for sure a ton that are all first-round finishes. So I doubled down on that one, and I cashed in for that bet. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a similar one-punch knockout situation in 7 seconds like he was able to do within his last fight, but I do think that he's going to bring the fight to Fares Ziam. Now, Fares Ziam, he fought our friend of the show, Luigi Vendramini, in his last fight, and one thing that I think we were able to see from Luigi's performance, although Luigi didn't get his hand raised, Fares won that fight. Luigi had him hurt multiple times. And I think that although Fares is still a young, growing, and developing fighter, I think that maybe Terence was able to see a couple of tells there that he'll be able to take advantage of. I really don't know, based off of Fares' style, how much he likes to be in a dogfight and how much he truly likes to get hit. I think that the thunder that Terence McKinney has in his hands is something that you have to respect. You have to always be on guard for. But you're also talking to a top-tier wrestler. You're talking to a kid who has elite ground skills in that department and can dictate where the fight goes. So if there is to be any sort of situation where they tie up or they get into the clinch, I absolutely give that advantage to Terence McKinney in this fight. I think that Terence is, although he's only a minus 110 near even favorite, I think that he's someone who is going to make the most of this opportunity. I know that he wants that Paddy the Batty Pimblett fight. Really and truly, he wants to just continue to go out there and make a splash and make his mark, but that's going to be a fight that is going to be on the forefront for everybody to see out there, and anybody who fights Paddy right now is going to get that massive bump in their exposure. I think that Terence McKinney knocks out Fares Ziam. I just think that he has too much of the sauce right now, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. Any man who's came back from the other side, that is a man that you do not want to mess with in the cage. Someone who has already seen literal death, that man has some dog in him that you can't even comprehend. I can't truly comprehend. That's our guys like I say, I've mentioned one of them earlier in Court McGee, Matt Brown. Those fighters of the world, those types of guys, your Jared Flash Gordons, those dudes are just otherworldly tough and have a dog and a mental grit to them that cannot be put to words. If we're taking a look at another fight that I think really kind of stands out to me, we've talked about him a few different times as being one of the brightest stars to come off of the Dana White's Contender Series. He's one of the top young prospects in a loaded bantamweight division. We have Adrian Yanez, who's going to be taking on the now proven to be ultra tough and durable in the stand-up department, Davey Grant. Davey Grant has been a guy who, he did drop the last one to Cheeto, but man, what a tough dude. In his previous couple of fights, he was able to triumph over Jonathan Martinez, Martin Day, Gregory Popov, all guys who are no slouch at all. And keep in mind, he does also, in the past, he has a victory over Cheeto a few years ago. That was the second fight. Who knows if there's a trilogy in the future if Davey Grant is able to put a few together here. Davey Grant is definitely going to be the underdog in this matchup, and he has pop in his hands that I think you have to definitely respect. And so if you want to maybe potentially go for a dog who has some value there, that could be it. But I just don't think that it's going to happen in this particular matchup, as I think that Adrian Yanez is just too good right now. That Dr. Pepper, man, that kid, when he steps into the cage, his last fight against Costa, that was a fight that you looked at and you saw him have to dig deep a little bit. You saw him have to bring out the dog and ultimately figure out how to find the win and stop that fight. And he did. That's a kid who I think in a couple of years we're talking about having a single-digit number next to his name and potentially being in title contention. Another fight that stands out to me that I think is great value out there for your money, especially if you're looking for the prop on the submission. You have to go with Pat Sabatini over Tucker Lutz. Now, Tucker Lutz is dog tough. Don't get me wrong. He's coming into this fight at 12-1. He has thunder in his hands. This dude has multiple knockouts on his record. He has referee stoppages. But when you have a guy like Pat Sabatini who comes from that Pennsylvania grappling scene, all those guys are tough on the ground. Every single one of them. I don't know a guy personally from over in that neck of the woods on the ground who isn't a tough wrestler or a strong jiu-jitsu guy, or both. Pat Sabatini happens to be both. What he did to Jamal Emmers in that last fight, man, that heel hook was absolutely vicious. That grappling acumen to be able to find a submission from absolutely anywhere and then to be able to attack the legs the way that he can, that's something that I think there is extreme value in, and you don't have too many top tier submission technicians in MMA, the way that a guy like a Pat Sabatini, who was a longtime CFFC regional champion, who's just finally getting his nod and his chance in the UFC. I think that there's great value in that pick for Pat Sabatini.
I throw my hands in the sky, how to get closer to God. Smoking this out while I drive. I threw my hands in the sky, bound to get closer to God.